How's it going, YouTube? Today I'm going to be doing a front strut replacement on my 2003 BMW Z4. My car currently has the Bilstein B6 struts and shocks in the car. Only issue, I did the job about 3 years ago, and I noticed earlier this year the rear B6s started to bottom out, and they are starting to leak. And I bought these shocks and struts through FCP Euro, so I returned the shocks and got more rear shocks, different B6s under the FCP Euro's lifetime warranty. But come to find out, I've found out by calling Bilstein of America that the Bilstein B6s are not a direct replacement for cars that have the S704A sport package. They're kind of like they're like a little bit of a lowered spring compared to the stock suspension. They call it the M Sport springs. Yeah, FCP Euro on their website stated that the B6s are a direct replacement for that type of suspension setup. But as my car went a couple of years, I noticed it starting to kind of get unsettled on the highway. And then I looked in the back and noticed my rear passenger strut was completely blown. And I replaced it, and it ended up blowing in a matter of 2 months. And then I even went a third time just to make sure and replaced it again, and noticed that the dust boot is now on the yellow shock portion of it itself. So it means the bump stop is, starting to push the dust boot down. And I even bought the correct bump stops for this type of suspension setup. So with knowing that, I called Bilstein of America. They said to go with the B8's. So I bought some B8 struts. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to replace the front struts. All right, so this right here, I've actually already gone ahead and changed the passenger front strut already. You can see that and there is the new B8 that I bought. And right here, this dirty strut right here is the B6s I bought back in 2022, about a few years ago. As you can see, the difference between the B6s and the B8s are the fact that these B6s are just a little taller. And all the differences is this piston that's right in here, from basically here to the top, is what's making the difference. The distance from the floor to this base is the exact same for the B8. So they make this height difference so that they can the B8s can accommodate shorter springs. Like I said, FCP Euro stated that the M Sport springs you can use these B6s. I didn't end up having an issue with the front at all. I mean, what looked a little strange was that after the Bilsteins, once you put some miles on them and they start to settle, it looked almost as if the front was sitting a little higher than the back. One thing about Bilsteins is that when you put these on for the very first time, you're going to notice the car is going to be raised a little higher. It takes about 500 to 1,000 miles to get these shocks to come down. So when I first put these B6s on, my front end looked like it was much higher, especially compared to the back. But over time, they started to settle out and look almost identical. I just was never happy with the way it sat. It just seemed like the front was always a little higher. But after talking to Bilstein America, they told me that with that M Sport springs, I really should be using the B8s. So luckily, FCP Euro, I've made them aware of the error, and hoping they change their website to update it, because right now it states that you can use the B6s still, even after I went through quite a lot of emails and phone calls with them. Luckily, they're letting me swap out these B6s for the lifetime warranty for these B8s. And so this car should hopefully sit properly once I'm all done. But yeah, these are the differences between the B6s and the B8s. And I'll show you how you go about getting the B6 out of the car. All right, So here, you got to get your car off the ground. Luckily, BMWs of this generation have a nice corner pad on all four corners for putting jack stands, and it also has a nice central jack point that all E46s and Z4s and E85s and E39s and all those 2000s, 90s BMWs have, which is nice. So you get it off the ground, take your wheel off. So pretty much here's the strut here. The only thing I'm not going to be able to show you, since I mentioned I had done the other side already, I had to disconnect this end sway bar end link. So I'm going from a B8 from a B6 to the B8, and so there's going to be a height difference. There's going to be a length difference. So the way that the sway bar works, if you disconnect both on either side, the sway bar, it like moves up and down and helps adjust the height that these end links are supposed to be. So the only way I was able to get it installed on my other side is I had to disconnect it from this side first. But I can just walk you through how you take them off. So basically what you're going to need is you're going to need a 16 millimeter wrench. And the 16 millimeter wrench, you're going to have to come in from behind and grab what you're seeing right here. The 16 millimeter just slides on, so you can hold on to this back part of this bolt here. If you don't put that, this bolt likes to just freely spin around if you were to use like an impact gun. So you need to have like a 16 millimeter, wrench in the back of this little spot here to hold on to it while you use your 17. I think it's a 17 that goes about taking the nut off, and it'll come off right here, and then it should just fall out of place, and you can just move it out of the way like this. The next step is going to be there's a pinch bolt that's down this way. It's you can see the head of the bolt is right where my finger is. You're gonna have to take that bolt out, and we're also gonna have to take these three 13 millimeter bolts out as well at the top, which are here, here, and here. And the shock should be able to drop right out. But first you need to also get like a smaller jack, maybe with like a rubber pad. Put the jack and kind of press up against the hub here of the rotor. Since these are new on my car, I make sure to use you can just use the metal of the jack, but just to be safe and not dent anything, I'm going to use a little rubber insulator and jack up on this hub here, so that once you start taking these bolts out at the top, what's going to happen is this whole shock's going to want to drop down, and having a jack that's pressing up right here will help this whole control arm assembly from just completely falling down. You don't want it to do that because of the brake line. The brake line's not very long. Some people go about just taking out the whole entire brake caliper assembly, and they just place it, in the back. You can do that, but I feel like that's just a lot more extra work. If you're able to just have like a little small portable jack and press up right on the bottom here, it's just much easier to not have to take that whole thing off and move it aside, because the jack does a pretty good job keeping this rotor kind of in place. And what's nice is you can use, you can slowly drop down the jack and it'll lower this rotor down enough where the studs of these nuts are on will start to come down, and then eventually they'll make their way free. So yeah, I'm going to show you how I'll go about doing that. All right, I'm not dealing with a whole lot of room here. I don't really have the most room in my garage. It's pretty good size, but I have a lot of storage in here. So I'm going to try and show you guys how I can get this all disassembled. But so this bolt that I was talking about, this pinch bolt, it's an 18 millimeter. So I'm going to take my impact and I'm going to take it out. So right here you can also see I got my jack. So I got this little rubber puck type thing, and I pressed it up on there, and I put some force up against it so that this wouldn't all just, I take all these nuts and bolts out, things just don't fall down. But right here you can see I'm loosening up that bolt. Come right on out. There's also like a little bracket thing that also is held on with that bolt. So just remember when you go to put that back on that you put this little bracket in here as well. That's got like a little opening. One important thing is that this little pinch spot down here at the bottom, it really clamps down pretty hard on the base of the strut. What you got to do is you got to buy this tool called a CTA. It's the CTA 4005. That's what this is. So you can see it's a 4005 CTA. What this thing is, it's like a little oblong looking piece of metal. It's like an oval. And what you do is you stick this in to the opening, and then once you do, you turn it so that it spreads the opening. They call it like the strut spreader tool, or like the shock spreader tool. So it's very important you get this thing because this can be very tight in there if you don't have it. You might have to use like some pry bars or some flatheads to really try to keep that open while trying to pull this all out. So I'll show you how it all goes in. Just got to get this thing. It's a little challenging with the sway bar that's in the way. The sway bar kind of gets in the way of this tool. You got to find where the opening is. So like right here where my finger is, you can kind of feel there's an opening. And then you turn in the direction that the tool is set for. And then eventually when you start to turn, you'll start to feel the tool is starting to get tighter. And that's where you want to, you want it so that it spreads it perfectly. So right here, and you can even ratchet the thing a couple times. All right, and you'll kind of feel it like it's all the way there, but you just want to not go all the way where it like ends up getting looser again. You really just turn it like 1/8 of a turn, 1/4 of a turn. So it's in there now. So this thing should come on out pretty easily. So we're going to go about taking off these top nuts up here. And with having our jack in place, we should be able to get this on out pretty simple. All right, like I said, 13 millimeter socket. You're gonna put them on these 3 nuts right here. Just get them loose. So one thing you'll notice, so since I have that jack there, if you don't put that jack there, you'll start noticing these nuts will just keep staying planted against this base here, and the whole thing will drop down. So you got to make sure you really have a jack down there or some sort of block of wood holding it up. So here you can just simply take these off. And what we're going to do is we're going to start lowering the jack down a little bit so that these start to come down. And we're just going to go very slow, kind of get it at the perfect height so that we can get it out of there. All right. You can see they're coming down. Gotta not go down too quickly. You see it's coming down a little bit. Can be a little crazy if you go too quickly. Let's see if this thing is free. You can see it's already it's free from the top. So what you got to do is you got to get it down low enough so that you can angle this and pull it right on out. So I'm going to see how I can turn it. That means that spindle's doing its job. The spreader tool is doing its job. So I'm able to spin this shock out. So I'm going to have to lower this a little bit lower, so that I have that ample space to pull this out. You're going to want to pull up and then over and down. It's very hard to do this with one hand. just gotta lower it a little more. It's coming down, coming down. Okay, it's starting to, my jack's starting to come off a little bit there. Let's see if it wants to come out now. All right, still needs to come down some more. All right, let's see if that's good enough. All right, let's see if that was good enough to lower it. All right, you can see it's just about clearing. It's very close. It's coming up. Gonna need to lower it just a little more. All right, I was able to get it out. I wasn't able to film it. You can see here's that little slot that it sits inside of. There's my little spreader tool in that little opening there. So it helps open it up a little further so that the base of this strut can open and slide out. And just try to lift this up so that the rotor doesn't come all the way down to the floor, and you can see there's not a lot of stress being put on the brake line. All right, as you can see, kind of have this in a stable spot. I just keep that spreader tool, I just keep that there. And you can see pushing up on the hub of that rotor helps out a lot more. You could push up on the bottom of the control arm, but the only thing is that the rotor is going to want to fall out while you do that and put tension on the brake line. So it's best to put it on like the hub of the rotor there. So now you can see I got the entire strut assembly out. So one thing you're probably noticing that seems weird is that there's this plate I have. This is a E86 reinforcement plate. So mostly you're going to probably notice when you take out your strut, you're going to see it look like this. It's going to just have these three, rods in this little indicator, lineup indicator. But this little plate here I bought it was meant for E46s, but I was never able to figure out if so they call the strut tower, they claim that on E46s that mushrooming could start happening over time, that this thickness of metal was just not made thick enough from the factory when they engineered the car. So they made these little reinforcements plates to help with the car not, causing a mushrooming effect on the strut tower. I could never figure out if the E85s and E4s has the same problem, but seeing videos of E46s and seeing how the engine and pretty much the suspension is all pretty much the same. It's a little different. I mean, the size of the springs are different from E46s, but otherwise, like, a lot of things are kind of similar. And so I just decided to buy one of these as just as an in case. The only thing you got to do is you got to drill a hole right here, because this little what you can do is you can unscrew this and take it out. It's like an indicator. It's supposed to be like meant for when they install these at the factory, like it helps them line the strut up properly. So you can take that out if you want. You don't have to drill a hole, but I just drilled a hole anyway because I felt like it helped locate my strut when I would install it and not have to worry about if it's lined up properly. I mean, they give you like a little line on these Bilsteins. It's usually where, it's on where like they have this, where they say which side of the car it's for. There's like a black line here that you have to line up that goes right in line with that little opening where this sits inside of. It's just kind of hard to tell if that's sitting the properly correct way. And I mean, I guess technically this also spins around a bunch, so it doesn't really, I guess I'm not making the correct point here. But I just decided to leave it on there. You can just unscrew it off. But I just left it on and drilled a hole just so it lined up properly. All right, so we're gonna take this little black plastic cap off. It's just like a little cover. Just take it off with a flathead. And in there you'll see is the nut. And that nut is gonna be how you remove the spring and how you remove the strut mount assembly. Really make sure if your mounts, when you're going to do this job, you're replacing the mounts. I replaced the mounts when I did this job 3 years ago, and sometimes these mounts can start cracking. They'll start making a big rip going around this black surface here. That's usually a sign that the strut is about to fail catastrophically. But since I did these replacements, I did this a few years ago, I'm not going to replace the mounts. I'm just going to replace the strut itself. So what we got to do now is we're going to have to get the compressor tool. You're going to go to AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts. You're going to get a compressor tool, and you're going to grab on to the spring, and you're going to go either side trying to get this spring to come off. What's going to be different for maybe your car is if you're on like SOX struts or the original factory struts, that this is actually shorter. And the only way you're going to really be able to get the car to get these springs to really compress all the way down, you're going to have to grab like from here and down here to really compress the spring enough to lower it all the way so that when you go to take this mount off, it doesn't just shoot straight up into the air. Luckily, I figured out on the other side that, Bilsteins make these a lot longer. They make this piston much longer, so you really don't have to compress that much. But since the B8's are shorter than the B6's, I was still able to just grab on these two, compress down on this side and on the other side, and I was able to still compress it down enough so that it could fit on the B8 strut. I really had to push the compressor tool where they were literally touching one another. The two little grabber arms were basically almost touching each other. But I was able to do it enough where I was able to slide on this mount, and I was able to get the nut going, and I started to get it on. But if you're not dealing with any Bilsteins, like if you got a B, I think even the B4s, they might not have enough. You might not be able to grab this with just each of these springs. You're going to have to go down to the third one. I don't know. I remember being able to do it on my when I had the original struts in the car. I tried to do it on this, but it was very hard just get these to wrap around without it hitting the base or hitting this top part right here. But that's going to be very important when you go about using the spring compressor tool. All right, I got the spring compressor tools on. Like I said, I'm only going to grab from one level of coil up to the next. So I got that on both sides. You're going to want to put these, you get two of these when you rent them from you're going to rent them from the store. You don't have to buy them. It's like $55. You got to put a deposit down, and then you can bring them back. And then once you're done with them, you can take them back to the store and return them for your full refund. So what I'm doing is, so you got to put these tools opposite of one another. They got to be perfectly 180 from each other, because you want them to compress the spring, in the same distance. Because if you just start compressing one side versus the other, then the spring is going to want to start bending this way or that way, and it's going to put stresses on this bolt and wanting to bend it that way or break it. It could break it if you put too much stress on it with it, too much lateral stress. So yeah, you just you gotta put these little safety pins, you gotta push them out. Do it on all four of them. Just use your finger to tighten them up at the top here. I'm gonna use an impact to just kind of make things go a little quicker with compressing this. And then what you'll notice is, just compress it down and keep checking with this black part right here, not the actual mount itself. You want to see if this black part here starts to have some sort of freedom. You're gonna see if it starts coming off. And if you notice it's lifting off, you can move it up or slide it around even. That means you're ready to go to start taking this nut off. All right, I use the impact. It takes a 19 millimeter. You can either just use a normal wrench with turning these down. But I use the impact itself. You kind of go back and forth to make it an even amount of compression being applied to the spring. And you'll notice the spring is starting to separate at the top here of this mount. and it's able to, you can see the spring is able to move up and down. So that means you're good to go and start taking this nut off. All right, well, so to get that nut off, it's gonna be a different size nut than what you have probably if you have a, like I said, a Sox or the original struts from the car. You're gonna have a smaller size nut on here, maybe a 21 or a 19 or a 20. With the Bilsteins, they come with 22 millimeter nuts. So when I bought my B6s, I bought this specialized socket. It's a Schwaben 22 millimeter CRV. I'll link it in the description below. But what this does is it's able to grab on to the nut right here. And you also need to have a 7 millimeter Allen as well, just a regular 7 millimeter Allen. And what this can do is it can pass through this socket, and you're able to place this on with the Allen as well. So here you go. So it looks like this, so that the 7 millimeter can hold on to the piston from spinning freely. Because what's going to happen is it's going to start spinning freely, the piston, if you start using an impact on that socket, and you won't get the nut to come off at all. So what you got to do is you got to put your, 1/2-inch socket, start working against it with the Allen, so that the piston stays in place and so that you're actually making progress on the nut. It's a great tool. It's kind of annoying because you have to keep every half turn, you have to take everything out and move it a little bit so that you can, it's not like a full, you can't keep it doing forever because it needs to connect to down to where the socket is somehow. But yeah, this is going to be how I take the nut off. You might be able to get away with an impact if you just take an impact straight to a nut. If it's a, this is a nylock nut on here. The BMW struts, I don't think came with nylock nuts, and it's the same with, maybe with Sox as well. So you're gonna need this if you've got a Bilstein shock that you're trying to take apart. You're gonna notice that the B8's, like I've got it down where it's just, it's just not putting enough pressure up on against this plate, but I'm gonna have to pretty much make these touch each other on both sides to get it to fit on here. But I'll show you that once I get this nut off. All right, as you can see, I got the spring off of here. You take off the little rubber boot, and there's also this top piece. The rubber part, I can't tell if it's separate or not. Yeah, I think it's separate. Can't tell if it's like built in. No, it's not separate. It is separate. You take this. If this doesn't, this will kind of like stay, it's pretty much stayed pressed into the top portion of this. You'll want to replace this if it's look like it's like really rusting really badly, or if there seems to be something wrong with it, like holes or something. I think mine is, it's not the best. It looks like it's rusting in certain areas, but I mean, it's pretty much generally not bad. I'm just going to reuse it. So yeah, you got to move over this rubber piece and make sure that this little cutout aligns with the cutout with the rubber piece. And also the end of the spring, it doesn't quite sit down in this little, you would think it would sit down in this portion of the of this little rubber piece, but it stops before over here, and then the bottom of the spring actually makes contact right here. So you got to be aware of that. You'll kind of see the indent from the previous, when you take it off, you'll see that there was an indent. Just basically line up the end of the spring with the same indent that you saw from over here, and just put it in the exact same location. But as you can see, the top is I still need to bring this spring a little bit further down so that I can get this back on there. This is the mount that will come off. You'll probably notice that this washer will come off, and there's like this little cap. It's like another little curved washer that like holds all the grease that's packed inside here. So make sure they come off together, and it's, you put the curve washer down onto here, and then this is just the flat washer that goes right on top of it. And it's going to be, you know, this piece is going to sit down in here, and then you're going to flip this over and you're going to put it down right on top of there. All right, so we got everything transferred over. You got to really, when I got those clamps down, pretty much touching one another, you got to really start stacking everything and really push this mount down pretty hard for there to be at least a few threads that pop up so that the nut can start making its way on. Once you start to get the nut on, it really starts to help out. So using my little socket, pass-through socket with the 7mm Allen, you're able to just slowly keep going all the way around and tighten it down. It'll help compress everything down straight from the middle. So it helps with engaging that mount. And then once you start to see a few threads up top like that, you can completely loosen up. Make sure before you do that, like when you get the nuts all the way down, just make sure your spring is exactly where it's supposed to be, here and down here. I had to actually retighten it again because it had separated and made its way over here. Especially if you start using impacts, the spring tends to wander around. So I had to tighten everything back down and then slide this over because it was pretty close to not being enough compression on the spring, but it was just enough with just holding on to two of them. Like I said, if you have those shorter ones, some of these are going to actually, the B8’s and like Soxes are going to be shorter than this. So you got to really compress this spring dramatically in it. The only way it'll work is if you're grabbing on one side the first and the third coil, and the other side you're only going to be able to grab on two. That's the only way you'll be able to really compress it all the way down. But I was able to get it to work. What we're going to do is we're going to put this now back in the car. We're going to slide it back in our little slot that we have that's still open with the tool, with the spreader tool. And then we're going to try and line these pieces up at the top. We're going to put our little reinforcement plate back on. Like I said, drilled a hole here so that it fits right on. You can take this little indicator off. There's like a little Allen spot here. You could take it off if you don't want it. But yeah, throw it on. It's just going to go back in its spot, and basically we'll start lifting the car up with the jack on the hub there, and we're going to get it so that these little, the threads of these studs are starting to poke through the holes of the strut tower. And then if you get a couple of nuts going on top, you also need to tighten down the you're going to need to tighten down the pinch bolt as well. Once that pinch bolt is tightened down, then you can let go of the jack at that point. But yeah, let's get it back in the car. One other little quick tidbit of info. You can see these two black lines on this printed label here. And make sure you're putting these on the correct way. So this is L, which means the driver's side front. The other strut will be R, which will be right. So that's the passenger side strut. So make sure you're putting them on the right side of the car. But these little black dots on the label here are considered where you need to line up in the slot where the little spreader tool is sitting right now. What's challenging is it's hard to see those lines once the strut is in, and even the little slot only ends about here. So I use like just a little Sharpie to extend the line further down. It'll help make you look on the back and you can see if you're lined up perfectly or not in the little slot. That helps with getting this, the end links to line up properly. But yeah, let's get this back in the car. All right, I got a little bit of a closer up shot. You want to slide this guy back inside its home here. You want to make sure you hear it bottom out inside this thing. And you can see my black line. Try to get it perfectly centered up. See, there's the tool there, the little spreader tool. You just got to make sure that that black line's like nicely lined up with where the spreader portion is located. And definitely feel down at the bottom. You can kind of see where it's bottomed out there. It's the yellow piece there. It definitely bottomed out when I slotted it in. And now we're going to lift the jack up so that we can get the top of this and those rods to start sticking through the openings of the holes. All right, now that you've lifted it up high enough, you'll see that the the little, the studs have poked through. You get the nuts going. Just get them hand tight for now. Get it, you know, before they start to get really tight. Just hand tight for now, because the plan is you're gonna tighten that nut inside there and these nuts as well up top when the car is down on the ground. So you're not gonna tighten these, and same with the other side. I haven't tightened those yet. But the plan is to tighten everything with torque, proper torque once the car's on the ground. Down here it gets to be a little harder because you should also torque everything with like the weight of the car, but the issue with doing that is you can't get to these bolts with the wheel on. So what you should do is use your jack here, jack it up kind of pretty tight, like really put some good force up on this hub so that it's really pressing and compressing this the strut. And once it's like kind of compressed and you're not pushing it up too hard enough where it's lifting the car up in the air, then you can torque down this bolt here, and the here's your end bar, sway bar end link. So you just poke it right on through here. Just remember, I didn't even realize this when I was switching. I had the B6 still sitting on with this connected while I was putting on the other side, and I was wondering why the end link wasn't lining up properly. It's because the length of these B8's are shorter, so you have to take apart this end link on this side if you want to go about connecting to the other side, because once you disconnect this side and the other side, the whole sway bar will, as I mentioned before, will just like it'll sway down, and you'll be able to have the proper height of connecting this. So the torque, so right now I'm putting up, you know, probably the best amount of pressure I should before it starts to want to slip off the car. The torque for this bottom bolt is going to be 60 foot-pounds. And again, remember, use your 16 millimeter wrench on the back of this and torque this nut down to 44 foot-pounds. And then once we do that, we put the wheels back on. And we torque the wheels down and lower the car down. I'll show you what the torque will be for these 4 nuts up top. Sorry, one more tip. Don't lift up on this hub when you're tightening down the sway bar end link. If it's not perfectly in line with the other side, the sway bar end link does not want to line up properly in that spot. It's gonna pull it down if you keep lifting up on this hub. So just don't put any upward force on this. Only do it when you're tightening that pinch bolt, but just maybe not do it for that nut right there. One thing I wanted to show you guys when putting the wheel back on, I don't know if any of you have ever looked up or seen one of these things, but these are like considered locating rods. It helps with putting the wheel on. You know, I'd spent years just busting myself putting these wheels back on, you know, since they don't have lug nuts, they have lug bolts. So it was always super challenging to hold this wheel in place and like try to get a lug bolt going. These little locating rods are like very convenient. They just slot right in where a lug nut would go, and then you would, you know, it would just hook on to these rods, and you slide it on, and at least the wheel will stay somewhat in position when you go to put on the lug bolts. And then I've got the bottom 3 on, so then you just, you know, simply unscrew these, and they come right on out, and you can just toss in, you know, your lug bolt in its place. Just a hack that I came to find out that FCP Euro had a tool that they sold. So I'll link these in the description below. They're very, very convenient and take the stress of putting a wheel back on out of the game. All right, now I got the car back down on its wheels. We're now going about torquing up all this stuff up top. So I got the my little pass-through socket and my 7 millimeter Allen. This is a so here's the paperwork you get from Bilstein. It says that the top nut needs to be torqued down to, as you can see, for an M14. This is an M14 size thread. So we're going to torque it down to 54 foot-pounds. So we're going to do that by getting your torque wrench, set it to 54. Then you're gonna put it on top. And I'm gonna hold on to that Allen wrench and torque it down to 54 foot-pounds. And then after I do that, I'm gonna torque these 3 nuts down to 18 foot-pounds. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing over on the other side. And once you've completed everything, you're gonna grab these little black caps, and once you take your sockets and everything out, you're gonna put it over that nut so that it protects it while you're driving from any sort of dust or particulates getting inside. And that should be it. Then I guess take the car out, see how it feels. You're probably gonna need an alignment after all of this is done. I am debating of getting an alignment since the B8s are a little shorter than the B6s, and I got the car aligned when I did the B6s, but I might go about getting it aligned. The car, I don't really drive this in the wintertime, and you know, it's fall outside right now, so I'm probably not going to be driving this car very often until next spring, so I might just wait till spring to get an alignment done at that point in time. But yeah, that should be it. All the other bolts and nuts down there have been torqued already. That's pretty much the gist of how to do the front struts. My plan is to make another video for the rear shocks because, like I said, I had the B6s on here all the way around, and come to find out that these S704A springs need to use the B8s and not the B6s. So my plan is to replace the B8s or the B6s on the rear. It was just a little harder to find them. They were basically out of stock at every single online site in the United States, and somehow Beamer World just magically had 2 of them left in stock, and luckily I grabbed the last 2. So luckily FCP Euro is planning to completely refund me the money on the rears, because those are the ones that have been failing. Those are the ones that had been leaking oil quite a bit, and the dust boot had been bottomed out quite a bit. So luckily they're going to take those back and just refund me the complete amount, since it happened within 90 days. The fronts I just had to change because you know, I just didn't want to have the B8s in the rears and the B6s in the front. It just wasn't going to ride properly with the different heights. So that's why I went with getting B8s all the way around. Luckily they're letting me do the lifetime replacement warranty with the B6s on the front with the B8s, just because it was their error that they had made. So yeah, I'll come out with a video soon once I get those rear shocks and put that up and show you how to do those as well. All right, have a good one.